Hey, good week, good morning. Welcome to Good Thinking Live. And I'm here from my studio. No green screen today because I had to be a little bit agile, move my office around a bit. And then when I set up my green screen this morning, it said that the GPU wasn't sufficient in the computer. So I just switched it around. I thought, okay, well, we'll broadcast live from my home studio. So welcome to Good Thinking Live. For those of you who are new, Good Thinking Live is a show that borrows just a little bit of time away from all the time that we spend on what to think so that we can explore and give ourselves a little bit of time on how to think, improving how to think or how we think. So if you're here, please let me know that you're here, where you're from, and this is a participatory show, so definitely tune in and definitely participate. And I'll try. I've mentioned before, it's a little clunky with the technology, so I will always try to bring in comments when I can, but if I miss your comment, it just means that things are scrolling so quickly that I can't. Audio is working, no video. Okay. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's not. Let's see if we've got it. Yeah. All right. So I've got a couple of comments, personal comments coming in that there is no video, but I think there might be. So let me know if there is a problem with the video. I'm going to say hi to a few people, and then we're going to jump right into today's show. So hello, Ibrahim. Hello, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Frank, better to do a live stream imperfectly than perfectly. Yes, exactly. And Frank from DC, fantastic. Well, it's like there's always things that can go wrong with the technology. And frankly, there's always things that can go wrong on a live show. But when I'm watching a live show, one of the things I like is that it can be a little clunky because reality is a little bit clunky. So let me make sure that Jennifer, I see you. Bill, I see you. Okay, good. You guys see me. Fantastic. So at least maybe someone had a problem with the technology on there and not mine. That's okay. Happens. Anyway, welcome to the show. Today we're going to address something that is kind of confusing to a lot of people. And with so much that we see in the media and so much that we see and experience now that everyone can document everything with the cell phone, it's hard to kind of make sense of of how to think about these things and then how to apply it to our decision making. And this has to do with the role of empathy in our decision making, and specifically how to think about sympathy and empathy and compassion in our decision making. All right, so I'll start with a question, and you guys know the drill. If you're regular on the show, you know the drill. Please weigh in. Okay, let me ask you this. Do you agree with the golden rule? And the golden rule is in different cultures. It's kind of an interesting thing because as I was really researching the golden rule for this show, I wanted to see if what I thought was true about the golden rule. And it is ancient. In almost every ancient culture and history, there is some version of the golden rule. And there's a couple of different ways of looking at the golden rule. There's the positive golden rule, which is treat others or do unto others as you wish to be treated or as you wish them to do unto you. So that's the positive. There's do not treat others as you would not want to be treated. So do not do unto others, I guess, as you would not want them to do unto you. That's the negative. And then the other is kind of more of maybe an empathetic, which is what you wish for others, you should wish upon yourself. And so those three are all in different, all come out of different cultures, ancient cultures. Do you agree with the golden rule? And if you do you agree with the negative, the positive, or the more kind of what don't wish to others what you would not want to wish to yourself? Or if you wish that on others, you need to wish it on yourself. Do you agree? Treat others like yourself? No. Ha ha. He with the gold makes the rules. Oh, Frank says he with the gold breaks the rules. Sorry, I'm getting so close to the screen. Actually, I'm going to try to use my phone so I can see your comments and I don't have to get my face up in the screen. He with the gold or she with the gold makes the rules. I actually had someone once in a meeting, like a really wealthy donor in a meeting, say that in reference to himself. And I was like, did you just really say that in reference to yourself? And I realized, he kind of thought that was true. And to some extent, it might be. That's a good one. I'm going to, and then treat others like yourself. No, that's Jennifer says no. We're back. I guess on Monday morning, a lot of people are streaming from home, or a lot of people are using the broadband. So we got ranked down a little bit, but we're back. Just a second, I was gone, I think. Anyway, the golden rule. Now, it turns out that there is some neuroscience behind this way of thinking and this way of kind of deciphering how we treat others and then using how we treat ourselves as a barometer for how we treat others. And it comes to, and it starts with mirror neurons. How many of you have read about mirror neurons? There may be even a neuroscientist or two in the audience. But if you read about mirror neurons, it's the type of brain cell that respond equally when we do something and when we perceive someone else doing something. So there are parts of the brain that activate, not to the same necessarily vigor, but in the same way or in the same space and in a similar way when we watch someone do something and when we do something ourselves. And these were first discovered in the 1990s. There was a team of Italian researchers they were observing monkeys, and they noticed that when the monkeys grabbed an object, it was the part of their brain that was activated was very similar to when they watched someone else grab that object. And they thought that could help explain how the monkeys empathized, or how they read other people's minds, or could feel sympathy for them. And but they couldn't really replicate this in humans in the same way at that time before the functional MRI, because they can't really put all these electrodes in humans' brains and do a research project. Not ethical in the same way it is perhaps with monkeys. But they found that these individual neurons would only respond to very specific actions. So if a monkey grabbed a peanut, for example, then that part of the brain would fire when the experimenter grabbed a peanut. But if they put it in their mouths, a different part would then the researcher put it in their mouth, again the same firing. But if the monkey grabbed the peanut, or the researcher, they didn't mirror in different ways. So they only mirrored rather with the action, which was kind of interesting. And they found evidence of this, but they couldn't really see how that worked in humans, as you can imagine. Have you read about this research? Let me know in the comments if you've read about this research or you're familiar with mirror neurons. I'm going to pull up, then we're going to give we're rubber chickens for those of you who know, or if you are interested in learning more about mirror neurons, and we'll get to how that relates to your decision making in just a few minutes. In another study, researchers were trying to understand how we perceive the touch and emotions and pain of others, and they found that the somatosensory cortex was active both when the subjects were lightly touched with a feather, like if a feather was rubbed, or this chicken was rubbed over my arm, and when they watched someone else be lightly touched with that feather. So my question to you is this empathy? Is this sympathy? Depending on what the action is it pity, or is it compassion? Is what they're seeing with these mirror neurons, how does that relate to your understanding of pity and sympathy and empathy and compassion? Okay, I'm going to bring in, let's see, we've got, oh, hey, Mohammed from Oman. That's great. I'm so excited that you're here. I can't see anything on my phone. I always look on my phone to see the comments, and for some reason, I'm not getting a lot of streaming. Whatever. Anyway, but that's okay. I can try to see your comments here. It just means I'm going to get close to the phone, or close to the camera. All right. So let's talk about the difference between pity and sympathy and empathy and compassion, because here's where the good thinking part comes in. Now, you can spend your whole life trying to look up definitions of what these things are, because they're not so crisply defined. These are concepts. And as you know, concepts need clarification. We need to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So for example, spend a minute on concepts. If I'm talking about success, then I need to make sure that and you're talking about success, I need to make sure that that concept of success, we're all talking about the same thing. So I'm going to lay out what the concepts that we're using for today's show. So pity is this feeling of sadness or commiseration with someone who is either worse off than you or worse off than what you see as the norm. And that's why we can have self-pity, because we look around, and particularly now that we can see all of the ways that these people live, and we say, wow, I don't have all that. And that comparison is where we can we can even say, wow, I'm so much better than that. But when we see and we say, well, I don't have all that, or I wasn't given all that, or that's a form of self-pity, because we're doing a comparison. So pity always kind of involves that relativity. All right. Next concept, sympathy, acknowledging another person's emotional hardships and providing comfort and assurances. We see this in messages of support, like when we see people in times of need. And this, if you think about this, you might say, I'm really sorry you're in pain, or I feel bad for you. I feel for you. And you can express sympathy without really understanding. You don't need to understand someone to express sympathy. Sometimes you might want to express sympathy just so that you're seen as someone considered sympathetic, but you really don't get it. And that's where it gets into this whole kind of, in a lot of understanding people who are not like us, understanding these crisp concepts is a very important starting point if we're going to try to understand people who are not like us. So sympathy might be, I don't really get it, but I feel bad that you feel bad. Or I don't really get it, but I'm sorry that you're experiencing this. Empathy is really, people talk about stepping in someone else's shoes, or getting in their head and looking outside their eyeballs. And you have to think about really understanding and feeling thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And it's an ability. And I think it's a skill that one needs to work on if you want to get better at. Like, I think if you can get better at empathy. Sympathy, I don't think you really need to work on it, because it's kind of a surface thing. You can acknowledge, it's kind of an acknowledgement. But empathy is an understanding, and that's a distinct difference. So if you really want to understand people who are not like you, you have to get to empathy. And you can have empathy because you've experienced something yourself. Or you can have empathy because you're able to put yourself into someone else's shoes. The second is harder, but even the first thing with empathy, there are dangers of using empathy in decision making. It's not entirely reliable. And we'll get to that and get to how it relates to good thinking. All right, let me say hi. I'm not seeing any more streams. Something's wrong. I can't see comments. I can't see post comments. I'm so sorry that I can't see your comments today. I don't know what's going on with my streaming service, StreamYard, but I will definitely, let me look and see. Yeah, I can't see any comments. Sorry. But if you do put comments in, either during the show or after the show, I promise that assuming they show up, and I think they will, I will get to them after the show. So I'll just spend an hour after the show getting to all of your comments. And this was going to be such a good one with your comments, because I have so many people here that are the regulars that are great, and I'm new people too, and I'm excited to see and learn about you. Anyway, all right, back to the empathy. There are different kinds of empathy. And my question is, when you think of empathy, do you think of emotional empathy, which is a feeling the same emotion as someone else? I have to drink some coffee. My throat is scratchy. You feel distress or happiness, or on an emotional level that has probably a measurable neurological component. There's probably a measurable neurological component. When you think of empathy, is that how you think of empathy? And then there's the cognitive empathy, which is known as empathetic accuracy. The cognitive empathy may be a little bit more useful in decision making, because while it is, helpful, I suppose, if you're trying to understand someone, to actually feel what you perceive as their emotions, or step into their shoes and feel for them, what really leads to good thinking is cognitive empathy. It's perspective taking, and it involves consciously adopting another's perspective and trying to understand how they're feeling or thinking. It's not the golden rule. It is not, if I were you, this is what I would do. It's, I am you, this is what I would do. Not if I were you, this is what I would do. It's not bringing yourself and to the person and trying to see how to mesh the two. It's really trying to get into the role of being that person. It is not possible, but it's an effort to get closer and closer to that. And here's the tricky part. Empathy really works on an individual level. It doesn't work so well on a group level, because how can you get inside the eyes of a group of people when each individual has such different experiences, from a genetic to an environmental to an experiential. And so when we try to use empathy as a tool for making decisions about groups of people, this is where we get hung up. Now, we can have sympathy for groups of people, but empathy is a true understanding, and that is really difficult on a group level versus an individual level. There's a positive correlation between feeling empathetic concern and being willing to help others. So if you're trying to be helpful, an attempt at being empathetic is necessary, but if you default to trying to generalize that empathy to a group of people, you can end up not being helpful. It can feel like you're being helpful, so you can acknowledge people's personal truths. That's a form of sympathy. But if you're going to prioritize objective truths, then it's very difficult to do so when you're trying to be empathetic with a group of people. And I experienced this. My husband and I were in Japan, and we were asked we were stopped on the street by a group of young, I don't know if they were making a documentary or if it was a television show. There was a little bit of a language barrier, but the point was they wanted to know about Americans' impressions of Japan. And we're two people. And my husband starts telling them all the things that he thought about Japan. And I'm thinking, that's not what I think. I mean, there was some overlap for sure. Like, we loved the country. It was amazing. Everything, we had such an incredible time. But there were a lot of differences. And this really highlights the fact that if you were trying to be empathetic using a data point of 1 to generalize to Americans' impressions of Japan, you'd get it way wrong. And that goes to everything we try to see when we look at groups or identity politics and try to make decisions based on empathy for a group. Now, compassion is different. Compassion is when you feel like, when you take empathy and you feel the need to do something. And it's not really sympathy. It's really caring about how others feel. It's not just acknowledging, hey, I'm sorry you feel that way. It's actually caring about how others feel. But here's where it gets tricky. Without empathy, there is no compassion, because what you get is a false compassion, or what Tibetan Buddhists describe potentially as idiot compassion, which is very harsh. Idiot compassion doesn't mean you're not well intended, but idiot compassion. And Pema Chandran, I never know how to pronounce her name. Idiot compassion refers to enabling, like the general tendency to give people what they want because you can't bear to see them suffering. Or we commit a compassion bypass because we act nice and we enable needs, or we simply overlook things that require correcting because we think that's not going to be helpful. Or we just skip empathy altogether and we just go start helping. And we see this in international aid sometimes, where for example, the United States might come in with an international aid team to another country, and rather than understand what some of the protocols are within that country, there is this sometimes, not always, but sometimes this paternalistic or patronizing, this is what you do. And so that can be a misleading, that can lead to bad decisions when you bring compassion without empathy. And like I said, empathy isn't easy. Let me see if I can see any comments. I still can't. Now I can see a few more comments. Hi from Molly, I'm horrible at pronouncing names, especially when I can barely see. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see some of your comments. Let's see. We've got Omaha. Is that your name? That's a great name. I'm blind, so it's hard for me to see and read and scroll at the same time. But hello, welcome to the show. Welcome to Good Thinking. I really want to know how you guys feel, or how you all feel about pity and sympathy, and then compassion, or empathy and compassion. Because Paul Bloom, who came out with a book recently against empathy, makes a very good case for why empathy is a bad thing, a bad ingredient in your decision making. I would argue that it comes down to semantics, and I think that really it comes down to applying the bad thinking is when you apply empathy to groups of people, and the bad thinking comes down to when you are compassionate without empathy, or you rely too much on emotional empathy and not cognitive empathy. And this also touches on this whole kind of argument about intent versus impact, because neurologically, we can determine intent long before we see impact. So if we ignore impact, it feels like we are making a bad decision about treating people fairly or treating people with care. But impact, or intent rather, happens, we know this with the mirror neurons, that it happens long before. It is a human wiring thing, that intent happens long before and can be seen long before any action that results in an impact. All right, so we have functional MRIs where researchers have found greater activation in the brain area associated with empathy when participants viewed members of an in-group. So we have some evidence of being neurologically programmed, at least initially, for the bad thinking that means that we are more empathetic to in-group. It's probably evolutionary. We might be more empathetic to our family members or to our tribe. And going back to the golden rule, some tribes in Africa, when I was doing some research back into the golden rule, some tribes in Africa actually had a golden rule that did not apply to individuals, but applied to tribes. So do unto your tribe, essentially, as you want done unto you, stuff like that. So that was kind of an interesting difference. And this speaks to this innate sense of understanding in-group people on a neurological level, understanding people who are like us, and why, if we're going to understand people who are not like us, it takes training. It takes good thinking training. And here's your tip. I wish I could see all of your questions and comments, but I'm going to get right to it. So if you've got pity, which allows us to be, that enables self-pity, and if we've got sympathy, which is acknowledging, I'm sorry, this is happening to you. And if you've got empathy, emotional empathy, I literally feel through neurons, mirror neurons, I literally feel what you're experiencing. There's like a, not just what I'm saying, but I can actually trace it in my brain. So we've got this emotional empathy. But the cognitive empathy is where the good thinking comes in. Because the cognitive empathy, it turns out, you can do something about this. And this will help you make decisions in every aspect of your life, because so many decisions involve other people. And if we don't understand other people and we act on our emotions of what we think they would do, or the golden rule, do unto others as you would want done unto you, even though you may not want the same thing I want, then that's where the bad thinking comes in, or that's where, I shouldn't say bad thinking, but that's where, well, that's outside the realm of good thinking. That's a nicer way of putting it. But cognitive empathy can be learned. And here's some tips for how to do that. Visualize someone you feel close to. Make sure you just take a minute, have someone in your mind, and think about showering them with good luck and freedom from suffering. Just think about that. Just showering them with this. And then visualize yourself and do the same thing to yourself. And now take a neutral person. Look outside, turn on the television, not a political channel. And just pick someone, not a show where you have an opinion about these actors or actresses and their roles, but some neutral person. And then mentally shower them with good luck, kindness, and freedom from suffering. And now visualize an enemy, someone you can't stand. A little harder, but do the same thing. Now expand this to all of humanity. At each stage, wish humanity or that person love, kindness, and freedom from suffering. Now that may seem a little woo-woo for good thinking, but there is some neuroscientific evidence that this kind of training on a regular basis can help you get closer to cognitive empathy. And getting closer to cognitive empathy means you are much crisper in making wise, rational decisions when it comes to involving other people. So, how's that for a messy hair and glasses and not being able to see your comments? I hope this helps. We will be back next week on Good Thinking. If you are enjoying the show or you want to share spread it, it's a little harder to share on LinkedIn where we're native LinkedIn. Right here, it's a LinkedIn show, but we are also streaming live on YouTube at Becky Saltzman. That's my YouTube channel. And if you subscribe, smash that bell on YouTube, you'll get notification when we go live. And I think hopefully I'm working on being able to pull in comments from the YouTube live. You can also watch the show after on YouTube. We'll make the live shows run later, but we won't be able to speak to your comments in real time. It'll be more like this, where I can't see your comments. Anyway, thank you very much. 9 a.m. Mondays, 9 a.m. West Coast, United States time, Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. I hope you have a great week. We are working on the Good Thinking Manifesto. It's being designed right now. So if you want a copy, it's going to only be to people who participate in the show or send comments that they want a copy of the Good Thinking Manifesto to carry with them wherever they go and to spread good thinking out to all of our friends, family, and the world, even our enemies, right? Have a great week. Thank you, good thinkers.